Aloha! What's up, everyone? I'm JayDreamerZ. Welcome to another episode of Truth in Movies. This is episode number 143, 143, which is appropriate given the movie that we're about to decode and break down. As I see it, from my perspective, people often say 143 to mean I love you, because that's how many letters are in those words. And I love this movie. This movie is about the apocalypse. For me, this movie is about life. This movie is about the purpose and the meaning and the reason behind things. And it's really about love. So there's going to be a lot of excitement. We're really going to start things off just jumping right into the action here. If you're interested in my theories on the plasma apocalypse, the fractal verse, ancient Oblivion and stuff, you're going to get hooked in right away. So it's good to see everyone in the chat. What's up, everyone? Shout out to my friends and family out there watching. Let's jump right into the presentation today. So we're watching The Life of Chuck. And as I always like to do, I always pay attention. I like to watch the movies with subtitles, and I pay attention not just to the symbolism in the movie, but to the symbolism in the production companies that bring us the movie. So, for example, the very first production company is Neon, and they show us these neon red lights. And I talk about the different neon lights that are seen during the plasma apocalypse, the red lights that come down from the plasma sphere up above us, and then the blue lights that come up, the geoplasmas that come up from within the earth. The next film company or production company, we see a guy standing here sort of on this mountain, and then lightning comes down, the clouds are all red, and he's standing on this rock with his arms uplifted, outstretched. We call this the Atlas pose. Sometimes it's called the squatter man pose. And we'll get into the symbolism behind this particular pose and its relationship to the rock that he's standing on and the lightning and everything as we get a little further into the movie. But keep that in mind because it plays a crucial and important role. Basically, they're giving you a little preview, a little taste of the story, the esoteric story that they're trying to share with us, I believe. It's also brought to you by QWG Meyer. What's QWG Meyer? Well, it really is the word quagmire. What does quagmire mean? Well, let's look it up. I like to go to Etymonline for my etymology or the root of word origins to look up these words. If we look up quagmire, we see that it basically means a soft, wet, boggy land marsh, right? It comes from the word quag, which means a bog or a marsh, and then mire. And mire basically means like thick mud or a lot of mud and stuff. How's that related? Well, it's related after the apocalypse. The world becomes a gigantic muddy mess because of all the gases that are released from within the earth rushing up to the surface cause worldwide earthquakes. When the earth starts to shake and crack open all over the place, the waters within the earth rise up to the surface and mix with all of the mud and the muck and the debris and the soil and the sand. And that process is called liquefaction. And what it does is it creates up here on the surface world a very, all of our land becomes a swamp, basically. It becomes full of clay and mud and things like that until those waters recede and go back down. Next up, they show us a red door. There's light coming through the keyhole of this red door, and there's a face on this doorknob. This is also going to come into play in this movie. Right? The god of doors, doorways. Why is the door red, though? Well, you'll see. It has a lot to do with the red sky, the blue sky, and the color of what I call the apex dome, because I believe the world is covered by an actual physical dome, just like in ancient cosmologies across the world and across time. And when the lights of the earth shoot upwards, we can see what's known as the firmament. We can actually see it. And the apex, the top of the firmament, it lights up red, glowing with the colors of those plasmas that are coming down from the heavens above. So that's the red door. It's the red room symbolism. You'll see it in a lot of different movies. It usually is, symbolic of magic on the other side, other worlds, a portal to other dimensions and stuff. And then, of course, we have the R and the R together for red room with the door in the middle. but it also, these R's create pillars on either side, right? So oftentimes when you see two pillars, sometimes it's the number 11 symbolically, but the two pillars are the pillars of Hercules, and they're showing you a location symbolically. These pillars of Hercules are in the ancient world, they were known as the markers of the furthest parts of our world. That if you go beyond those parts, you're now entering into a brand new world, or a wonderland, or a fantasy land, or a neverland. So here we have the production company, Red Room, with the pillars of Hercules, the door, the entrance in the middle. That door, there's two of them at the middle of our world. One goes down into the earth, into the hollow recesses of our world, into Tartarus, into Sheol, into the underworld, into Hades, etc. And then there's another one that's directly above that, which is the apex dome, which opens from time to time, allowing us to travel to other worlds outside of this one. Now, this is not a new concept, and it's nothing that I've just made up. This can be found all throughout antiquity, especially recorded in paintings. The Freemasons keep and record these things, and they will show you these things symbolically. But if we look at old paintings, especially from medieval times or the Dark Ages, we can find the symbolic elements that exist here. Here we would have the light of the world, the light, the actual geoplasma, or the light of the world, Jesus Christ, in between the two pillars on either side. And if we look closer above that, we can see the apex dome. We can see this inverted dome at the very top with this godlike figure in the middle of it. And it's often portrayed as red, especially in the center. Oftentimes it would also have like a blue fringe around it. But this is your apex dome. This is the doorway in the middle, and the god of doorways and whatnot underneath it, right? Here's another example. So I've got a few of these. I've done many different presentations about the apex dome, about the red door, or sometimes it's seen as a blue door, like I said. But here we have Jesus once again. I don't feel like this is a common picture of Jesus. This is supposed to be the ascension, when Jesus flies up and rises up to the heavens or whatnot. But in the pictures from medieval times, he's always shown rising up to this red inverted dome that's up in the heavens, which is basically a part of the firmament. Here it is again. This is probably one of my favorite depictions of this, and you can find probably like 10, I don't want to say hundreds, I haven't counted how many, but a multitude, which is an appropriate word to use in this presentation. You can find a multitude of pictures of Jesus rising up to this interesting object that's up in the sky, with this blue sort of cloudy fringe and then this redness right above it. And it'll show his feet kind of just hanging there in the sky as people look on. Now, I've discussed this, I've talked about this, and in short, I'll tell you what this means to me. There is a blue beam of geoplasma, the tallest and largest geoplasma, that shoots up out of a mountain at the center of the world, right? It creates a pole or a pillar or a beam or a tree or a cross or a bird. Sometimes people interpret it as different things, and it stays there pulsating for an age, and it's a completely different age than the one we live in. But when that beam retracts and it goes down back into the earth and it dies, it leaves behind a sort of spirit form. It's called an afterglow, and the reason that the air where it once was continues to keep that image is because the particles and the gases that were being ionized for 1,000 years, they still contain that charge, although the beam itself has left. So it's sort of a ghost. It's sort of a spirit that stays there. Now, whenever the apex dome opens up, when the sky opens up, our atmosphere will depressurize, and all of this afterglow, all of this spirit image of the beam that was once there will get sucked up, and it'll leave this world as it goes up into the heavens. And that brings us to the title of the movie, The Life of Chuck. Now, Chuck, Carl, Charles, and other derivatives of this name are seen all the time throughout the movies. I pay close attention to the names of the characters in the movies, especially when I'm looking at things through this sort of symbolic lens, especially the plasma apocalypse lens. Now, we're going to start in reverse order with this book that's been turned into a movie. We'll talk about that in a bit. We're going to start it with the end, right? The end and the beginning are really the same thing. Depends on how you look at it, but I see them as the exact same thing. Act 3. Thanks, Chuck. Now, what does Chuck mean? The name, right? My name means something. It means one who heals or one who brings healing. Chuck is a nickname, a short form of the name Charles, which means a free man. Okay, so somebody who is free, right? Or represents freedom. It's also another form of Carl. Now, if we look up the name Carl, we can see here, free man. Also, the actor Morgan Freeman, right? All of these actors, they choose stage names and stuff typically. So they're choosing them symbolically, and oftentimes they're related. So a common man, a man of low birth, a male, it could just be a male. Sometimes Carl is also seen as husband, but really free man. Remember, we also did a movie called Free Guy, where the guy always dressed in the blue shirt and stuff. Same concept as what's being portrayed in this movie. Now, we start things off with the classroom where there was a teenager reading a poem. And down here, this is why I put on the subtitles. The poem, he's reading the part where he says, "It's eternal life." And that's how this movie begins, with eternal life. And it's appropriate when we understand who these characters represent. He's reading a poem by the author Walt Whitman, the poet Walt Whitman, which is also interesting because WW symbolically is the same thing as M&M or MM, or if you turn it sideways, 33, right? And 33 is symbolic of Mount Meru at the center of the world because it's said to be 33 miles around, according to the legends. Now, he's reading the poem and he says, "Listener up there, what have you to confide in me?" So Walt Whitman, or the protagonist of this poem, is talking to God, okay? He says, "Talk honestly. No one else hears you. Do I contradict myself?" Now he's talking to God in this poem, Walt Whitman's poem, A Song of Myself, right? This character is looking up at the heavens, speaking to God. But then he says, "Do I contradict myself?" while speaking to God, which means God and him could be seen as synonymous, as the same thing. He says, "Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." And then immediately after he says, "I contain multitudes," right? This girl in the movie says, "My God." Now pay attention when they say things like, "My God," or "Oh my God," or "Jesus Christ," or something. They'll usually say it right after a significant part that's talking about God. Right? Symbolically speaking. So this girl looks at her phone, so she gets some bad news. She says, "My God." So here's Walt Whitman's book, or a collection of poems called Song of Myself. So he's speaking of himself when he is speaking of God. One could make the point. And then she's freaking out because she says, "California, there was another earthquake." So now we're starting to see that there's some sort of apocalyptic type events happening, or possibly there will be. Okay, definitely will be. She says, "A huge chunk has gone from Santa Barbara to Fresno. A huge chunk of California just broke off and sank into the ocean." So the teacher checks his phone. 9.1 earthquake hits California and it's all gone. Now, hold on. I want to back this up just a bit because sometimes, keep in mind, this is all props. They specifically choose props for the movie that go along with the storyline of the movie, but also props that go along with the deeper meaning that is being shared within the movie. Now let's take a look at what props are in the background over here. We conveniently have the concept of space, which to me is the macrocosm, all of the universe, or what I call the fractal verse, which I'll explain in a minute. And then microscopes. The microverse, the smaller universe, the microscopic, the tiny, the unnoticeable, things that are so small we're unaware of them, versus things that are so big we can barely conceive of them. Right next to each other. Purposefully done and purposefully placed there. Not in the forefront, but in the background, so that your subconscious picks up on these things. So the teacher checks his phone. California's broke off into the ocean. It's all gone. Now, I like to study cartography, ancient cartography, and the maps and the things that are shown to us on the maps. And the way that people thought that the world once was, to them, it was reality. And the strange anomalies that are shown. This is the west coast of the United States, not too long ago. And this is California, which appears to be broken off into the ocean. This appears like this across many maps across time, actually, going all the way back to the beginning. There's a lot of interesting things on here. I could probably comment about all kinds of words, but my point is I just wanted to show you that there was land that was depicted as broken off, or an island mass that was separated from the west coast of California. Now, many people will make the case that that's just Baja and they didn't understand how small Baja was or something. But there's also extra lands. I love studying Phantom Islands. Okay, there's the land of Jesus that we spoke of many times, a huge continent that was pictured between the west coast of the United States and Siberia. There was also a large island on Urbano Monti's 1587 map of the world that featured an island that I believe looks a lot like a contender for Lemuria, right? Now, the teacher checks his phone, and what he sees on the phone is no internet, and he gets the dinosaur. I think that's appropriate that they would show you the picture of the T-Rex that are extinct, right? From another age, from a place long time ago. There will be no internet in the future after this next shift. There was no internet in the past, in the age that happened before us. We will return to a time of the quote-unquote dinosaurs, or gigantism, ruling over this world. Now, when you're watching a movie like this and the main character checks their phone and there is no internet connection and they don't have phone service, keep this symbolism in mind, because this will happen during the next apocalyptic shift, whenever our world goes through a polarity reversal. The electromagnetic polarity fluctuations mess with our internet and our Wi-Fi and the towers and cable and everything electrical in nature, just like we've talked about before with the most recent event happening, about 100 years ago or 150 years ago or so. And that was called the Carrington event. So he checks his laptop once again. Oh, the network's down, no internet service, no phone service, right? That's because of the electromagnetic fluctuations that's messing with it. Now, the teacher's having these parent-teacher conferences. The parents can only focus on the fact that the internet is not working. They don't really care to talk about their children, how they're doing in school or anything. Everyone is just worried about the internet being gone, right? Which shows us it's one of the omens of the apocalypse, okay? When this starts to happen, which it will, you'll see. Here's some other omens that they're showing you on the television, which is interesting. So now you're watching television, watching the movie, and the characters are watching television, and they're showing you the truth, I believe. They're showing you the truth of these things, and they want you to pay attention. So Northern California is in ruins. Why? Huge earthquakes are happening. Water levels are rising, right? So in the modern world, this is happening now. All these things are happening now. With the atmosphere getting hotter, the focal point, the sun, getting hotter and more focused. We'll talk about that here in a bit too. The gases being released from the ocean because of the water's expanding. They release their oxygen and stuff. And then the earth as well is releasing a lot of gases too. A lot of those gases are combustible, so we get wildfires all across the world and in diverse places. We have the lava being pushed up more, so we have more volcanic eruptions and more earthquakes. And it has a physical effect, the introduction of all of these more gases and therefore more pressure and therefore more frustration. That happens in nature. Okay, so when you have more pressure, I mean, you can just think of it as being pressured. If someone pressures you, then a person tends to get more frustrated or whatever. That happens in nature. It happens specifically with grasshoppers, right? When you have more and more grasshoppers getting closer and closer together, that's when they become locusts. They're just grasshoppers or, types of bugs that are similar to grasshoppers. But when they get closer and closer together and they start vibrating, making noises and rubbing their legs and all the different things that crickets and grasshoppers and stuff do, then they become agitated. The humans also do things like this as well. They become more and more agitated. This leads to rioting and degradation of morals and all the things that we're seeing happening in this world. And then, of course, we have the floodwaters that start to happen as the ocean levels start to rise, mostly because ices are melting, right? Because it's getting hotter and hotter, but the water itself is getting hotter, which causes it to expand and therefore rise. Now, one of the main characters looks up as he's driving and he sees a strange billboard. It's got a picture of some white guy on it and looks like he's, works at a bank or something. It says Charles Krantz, 39 great years. Thanks, Chuck. Now, if that's all, if that was the only time you saw that, it would be meaningless. It would have no point here. But because the movie is based off of this particular character, we're going to look up his name. Starting with his last name, Krantz. If we look up the name Krantz, all names, your first name, middle name, last name, they all have meanings. They're actually just words. Or I shouldn't say just, they're words. They have meanings to them. So what's the etymology of Krantz? Well, when we look it up, we find there are different versions of it in different languages, but in short, it implies something that is circular or a ring. Okay? A ring. So Charles the Ring. Okay? So whoever this guy is, symbolically, his name is telling us what he represents symbolically. Some sort of circle. So keep that in mind, okay? If we look it up in South Africa, Kranses, it actually means an encircling or overhanging wall of rock. Now that's also interesting to me too, as I do talk about that holy mountain that I believe exists at the center of the world called Rupus Nigra, the dark rock, the black rock, the magnetic mountain, the lodestone mountain, the quintessential mountain of all religions across time, everywhere, where I believe the throne of God to be, the seat of this energy, this power, this light of the world that erupts and shoots up out of the center here, this geoplasma that comes up out of this volcano at the middle of the world, okay? And this right here is a map of the Arctic by a cartographer named Gerardus Mercator. He was very popular, very well known, and so he was employed, you know, for much of his life. His children even took up his mantle as being cartographers after he passed away and finished some of his work. This circular island right here is what I believe to be the Garden of Eden, terrestrial paradise. It is the subject of my second book, Return to Hyperborea, which is available on my website, JayDreamerZ.com. So here's another example. This is seen to us all the time in movies, right? Look at the colors that the characters are wearing. If they're wearing blue like this, oftentimes they will represent the blue beam of energy. Sometimes that is seen as masculine. Sometimes that is seen as feminine. Sometimes it will be some powerful entity, aka some form of god or something in the ancient world. And they will see a male god. Sometimes they will see a female god, or Sophia, or a princess, or a king, or a husband, or a wife, however it may be. But the blue shirt here, right? You've seen this in a lot of different movies. Free guy also, right, means Carl or Charles, or, you know, another famous Charles would be Charles the Great or Charlemagne, Carl Magna, right? Carl Magnus. Chuck. Let's look at the nickname Chuck. Chuck can also mean to shock, right? To throw something, to shock, to strike like lightning. Well, that's appropriate because that's what I believe this represents. This character represents that beam of energy that comes up into our atmosphere and fills our world, giving us a new oxidation event, as it's described in modern academics. The world becomes oxidized once more. We have a fresh supply of oxygen in our atmosphere, other gases too. Now, we go to another one of these characters. This woman is a nurse. She's in the hospital. She's listening to the radio. And the narrator says the staff whose numbers have been dwindling. So I would like to comment on that. Okay, this is very subtle, what the narrator is saying right here. And try to follow me. If you can't follow me, it's okay. You know, on my Plasma Apocalypse playlist, I have one of my first videos is called What is the Plasma Apocalypse? It's like 7 or 8 minutes, and it hits all the Cliff's Notes of everything that I'm describing now. So if this sounds unfamiliar to any of you, feel free to go check out that particular video, okay? And you'll get all caught up real quick. All right, so staff. When it talks about staffs, they're talking about pillars and beams and rods, and it's symbolic of these geoplasmas that shoot up out of the earth, creating pillars and staffs and rods. And that's why so many of the ancient gods, as they're portrayed, have a staff or a magic wand or things of that nature. The human form is not the god. It is the staff itself, actually, the staff of power or whatever. The staff whose numbers have been dwindling, he says. So now we understand what age we're looking at, right? We have an age where we have lights coming up out of the earth as pillars and columns and staffs and stuff all over the place. The largest one is at the middle of the earth, but there's smaller versions everywhere. Wherever there's a cave, wherever there's a volcano, there will be energy coming up everywhere out of the earth. But over time, those gases will recede, and they will all, from the outside inward, start receding and going back into the earth and disappearing. So the staff's numbers are dwindling. That's the time of magic. That's the time where there is no ocean. Okay, that is a time of fantasy and fiction to us today in the modern world. That's the time we will be going into when those staffs, when those lights across the world are seen. Late last summer, people have begun referring to themselves as the Suicide Squad. So this nurse and all of the hospital people, all of these apocalyptic events, these cataclysms are happening around the world, and all of the people are coming face to face. They can no longer ignore it. Okay, the omens are evident. They are obvious. And what's on everyone's mind is this the end? Is the end near? Is it coming? So a lot of people resort to that. You know, they resort to giving up on life, unfortunately. And I'm sure that's probably something that may happen as well when these events start. When they leave the world of the movies and they venture into reality, as they always will. Okay. Now the announcer cuts out and he says, "We'd like to say thank you to Charles Krantz for 39 great years." Now, this is interesting. We saw a billboard about Charles Krantz. Now there's this weird radio spot featuring Charles Krantz. It's starting to appear everywhere, right? Now, keep in mind, this movie is based on Stephen King's short story called If It Bleeds. So this is a Stephen King movie. And we've covered a couple of his movies, right? And they all express similar themes. For example, The Black Rock is his Dark Tower, in you know, to just make a comparison. And I'm going to get to like The Shining and stuff later too. So all of these stories are interconnected, every single one of them in the Stephen King universe at the very least, in my opinion. So she's on the phone with her ex-boyfriend. She says, "You know about California, right? I heard today that there are hundreds of thousands of refugees trekking east." Now, it's interesting when they mention directions in these movies because esoterically speaking, in the ancient world, east was not left forever or right forever, east and west. East was upwards towards the stars. West was downwards into the earth. And if you want evidence of that, feel free to do an etymological study on the roots of those words east and west. And you'll find that east means up towards the star, west means down into the earth. This is the band 21 Pilots, one of my top favorite bands because every single one of their songs lately, in the past decade at the very least, is about the same concepts that I'm presenting to you in the Truth in Movies. So they have a whole song called East is Up, and they talk all about these secret societies, the secret knowledge of a recurring cyclical apocalypse that happens, escaping the earth during this time, traveling out into multitudes of other worlds. You can also see the yellow color that they use, and we go back to the movie, and there's the yellow color again being used for this hallway that leads up to the attic. So this guy's on the phone with his girlfriend who calls him up, and he's like kind of just looking at the attic, and he looks to the top, and there's this door. When we look closer at the door, we can see, it's hard to see here, but the doorknob is this emerald green color. When you see the emerald green color, it almost always represents the North Pole because of the aurora borealis and that emerald green light, right? That surrounds Hyperborea. If in fact there is a land or was a land up there, then this emerald green color represents this paradise, fantastic type of area of land. Pardon me. So the attic also represents the mind. Okay, so the attic of our world, the top of the world, which is also the North Pole, it can also represent the top of the dome or the apex of the dome up there, right? But it also represents the mind itself, the attic of the mind. So going into the mind, this door is locked, right? So therefore, symbolically speaking, the mind is locked. There is something kept hidden from the mind and those who are outside of it experiencing it. That will make more sense here in a bit as I talk about the fractal verse. So inversely, if the attic represents the top of the world, then the cellar door, which is a saying from Donnie Darko, represents going into the world, right? So there's a door, like the red door, how we talked about at the beginning, which is the top of the firmament, the dome over the earth. And then there's another door. There are two doors. One that is terrestrial, which is that black mountain, right? The inner earth entrance. You go down into it and you go into the cellar of the earth. Or you could say you follow the white rabbit, you know, under the tree of life or whatever, under Yggdrasil. In Norse mythology, that's the world tree, okay? Now, she's on the phone, and he's talking to her, and he says, have you ever heard what Carl Sagan said about the cosmic calendar? So he's looking at the calendar, and he says, well, the universe is 15 billion years old, and if you took all of that time and you put 15 billion years onto one calendar year, right, and you compressed it into one calendar year, then the Big Bang happens the first second of January 1st at the very beginning of the year. This is academically speaking, right? Now, we're in the final millisecond at the very end, the last minute of the last day, December 31st. So there's a correlation there between our modern calendar, how we mark time, and apocalyptic events. I find that to be important because I believe time, the way we keep track of it, begins with the end of the apocalypse or the end of this creation event, when the light of the world is either seen and makes its appearance, or if you're already in that age where the light is there, it disappears and it dies and it goes down into back down into the earth. And then whenever it comes back or disappears again, that's when time ends. That's when time keeping or keeping records of time ends or begins. So the last 10 seconds of the last minute of the last day on the calendar, and you can see it's ticking towards midnight. Symbolically speaking, we have a clock, a doomsday clock. When it gets to midnight, that means that's it. It's time to start time over again, because that's as far as the clock can go before it has to recycle. It has to go through the cycle once more, right? So that's why we call it the doomsday clock. And we are pretty dang close to the doomsday clock officially coming to its end. Excuse me one moment. Okay, so the boyfriend is watching television, and all of a sudden his show is interrupted. None of the channels are coming in clear, and they say, sorry, we're experiencing technical difficulties. I can relate. I go through that all the time. But as he's watching, all of a sudden this commercial comes on. And it's a commercial for Charles Krantz, just like the billboard, just like on the radio. And they say, thank you for 39 great years. Something's going on with this Charles Krantz character, and he's trying to figure it out. So they say, thanks, Chuck. And you can see the blue color also all the way around, not just what he's wearing, but in the background. So he walks out of his house the next day, and he meets one of his buddies who has to walk to work because everyone's stuck in traffic because of all these cataclysmic events that are happening. He says a giant sinkhole opened up on the market in Maine, on Main Street. Sinkholes opening up are also another omen of our apocalypse that we are, from my perspective, we're going to experience sometime very soon. The gases release up from within the earth, as I've talked about many times. The earth shakes open, and we have the surface just falling in on itself. And we see this all over the place. You can, if you look up sinkholes in the news, you'll find just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, not small ones, huge ones, gigantic ones, oftentimes pretty perfectly circular, which I find to be very interesting as well, right? So sinkholes, the world is just opening up with all of these holes and stuff where gases are being released. Sometimes there's other explanations. So I'm not discounting anomalies like a water main broke or something like that, but I'm not talking about those specifically within the city. Now there's a television show that touches on this exact same concept. It's called Outer Range, which takes place in Wyoming, where this mysterious sinkhole just appears out of nowhere. Now, when people go down into this sinkhole, they travel through time. They go back into Wonderland. They go into some other place, some fantastic times or something, right? And this entire show touches on similar concepts, going down the rabbit hole into the inner earth where the world is completely different, or it seems like you went back in time, okay? So this guy continues to talk to his buddy about all these omens of the apocalypse that he's seeing. And he says, the bees, man, I mean, we were in trouble a decade ago. The bees are disappearing, but now they're completely gone. All the honeybees just disappeared. They're touching on this in the movie, but this is also something that has been in mainstream media for a couple of decades. People have been noticing all of the honeybees are starting to dwindle in population. They're dwindling in numbers. They're dying off in mass, which is huge and crucial when it comes to our food supply, right? And the food chain and stuff, because these honeybees pollinate most of our food, at least here in the United States. Where have all of the honeybees gone? It's been on the news multiple times. The honeybees are dying off. People are coming up with various reasons, from invasive species of other types of wasps or bees that might attack and kill the queen and stuff. But it's also been in the news that hives have their bees die off in heat, in extreme heat, right? This has been on the news multiple times, that as it gets hotter and hotter, honeybees can only survive. They can only survive in their hives under a certain temperature. If it gets too hot, they'll start flapping their wings to physically cool themselves off, to keep it cool. If it gets hotter than that, their hive can just melt. The wax inside of it can melt. They get overstimulated. They start getting too hot and they'll die off. And it doesn't take too much heat. I think something over like 97 degrees, if it gets hotter than that, the honeybees just start to die. Now, he meets another woman, and he asks her, she works at the bank, and he says, hey, do you know that guy that's on the billboard at your bank? She says, yeah, I don't know him. I saw the ads on TV. There's no ads for anything, cars, discount furniture, just Charles Krantz, 39 great years. Thanks, Chuck. And this guy's clarifying, he doesn't work at your bank or anything, right? Like, you don't even know who this guy is. She's like, I don't know Charles Krantz. I don't know who that is. It's a mystery. He keeps popping up in everyone's life. Most people don't really think about it too much. They're not on a truth-seeking path to discover who Charles Krantz is. It's just kind of a splinter in their mind. They're just kind of slightly annoyed because they recognize it, but they don't want to really go any further than that. So he says, I think it's just a prank. It must be performance art. You know what I mean? Ultimately, Charles Krantz represents the apocalypse. He represents a couple of things, but he's synonymous with their world ending, or a significant change at the very least in their world. Nobody wants to look into it, although he's popping up everywhere. Goes back to talk to his friend, and he says, the frickin' volcano in Germany, man? That's crazy. That's because Germany has no active volcanoes, okay? They have no volcanoes right now, currently, that are erupting. They do have fields upon fields of dormant volcanoes or extinct volcanoes or whatnot. Now, if what I'm saying is true, because I believe that the gases are shooting up from within the earth right now as anomalies and as omens of the apocalypse, if it continues and it gets worse, then it won't just be Germany where dormant volcanoes will start to come to life. You'll see that on the news, or I would expect to see that, if my theory is correct, that we'll start seeing news reports of extinct volcanoes coming back to life all of a sudden, and the sleeping giants awakening. So his buddy's telling him, man, we've seen these signs for a long time, and we just kept telling ourselves it's all going to blow over. He says, I think that if the suicides slow down, I think people will just wait. They'll just wait. And his buddy says, wait for what? For the end. This is the end of everything. Now, they're being very blunt. They're being obtuse. They're being direct and in your face that the movie's talking about the apocalypse, okay? So there really is no question there, okay? They're going through an apocalyptic event. This is the end. They're being very direct with you. He says, I mean, everyone knew there was trouble with the environment, right? So they're speaking to us. This movie is a mirror. We should see ourselves in this movie. We should see our modern world in this movie and our society in this movie. There's all kinds of signs happening now, but we're ignoring them. Or we're exemplifying what the Bible calls being willingly ignorant, right? Knowing and seeing that things are changing drastically, quickly, and powerfully in the world that we're experiencing in a short time. But people are turning a blind eye, trying to come up with various excuses and justifications. So they look up And they go, what the heck? And they're skywriting up in the sky, signs in the heavens, you could say. It says, thanks, Chuck. And they're just freaking out. A girl's walking past all this graffiti, and you see that Chuck is making his way into the graffiti, into the parts of people's normal everyday lives. This is akin to what I believe is an awakening that happens before the apocalypse actually comes, okay? And that has a lot to do with the amplification of the energy in the atmosphere, all the gases, the increase in pressure. It allows us to connect to one another once more and to think outside of the box much easier. It also amplifies our existing energy. So in short, if you're an evil person, you're going to become more evil, and society will become more evil in general. If you're a good person, that will be amplified. You'll become more good and lean towards progress and growth and things like that. And so will those in society. But this is popping up everywhere in their pop culture, in their news, all over the place. And this is exactly what I am seeing. This is why I do this segment, the truth in the movies. I see this concept of a cyclical apocalypse and a back and forth between the modern world and technology and the world as we experience it, and a fantastic world, a world of magic, a world of power, a world of living longer and being healthier and stuff. And I see it ingrained within all of these mediums. It's my Chuck, I'll say, okay? Now she goes to the hospital and her work buddy is like, Felicia, something's weird. So he takes her into the room, and the EKG, this machine that keeps track of heartbeats, it's on, and it's keeping track of a heartbeat with no patient. There's nobody there. And she's like, what's wrong with that? He's like, it's not just that one. Come check this out. Takes her to the rest of the hospital. All the EKG machines are on and keeping track of this pulse all by themselves. Two things this symbolizes to me personally, okay? One is that the machines turn on by themselves, just like we talked about with this thing called the Carrington event that happened over 100 years ago in the 1800s, where the aurora stretched across the earth, and there was so much electricity ambient in the air all the time that people's telegraphs were on all by themselves, working all by themselves. They didn't have to plug them in. They actually unplugged their telegraph machines, and people here in the United States could still talk to people in Russia using only the electrical current in the air itself. They were not plugged in at all. So if that happens again, imagine all of our technology that we have had since telegraph machines coming to life, turning on their own, working all by themselves, right? Sometimes going out of control and maybe posing a danger to people too, where the robots come alive. The second thing is that this is showing you the pulse of the earth. Right? That the earth itself has a sort of heartbeat. It has a sort of frequency that it puts out that many people, humans, don't really notice. So they're showing you all these things. They're showing you the phone signal. It's still not working. Call failed, unable to connect to the mobile network. So the phones are not working. The internet is not working. This has everything to do with electromagnetic shifts and polarity reversals of our world. They show you another banner, another advertisement for Chuck, 39 great years. I'll explain that here in a bit. This guy walks up to this random guy sitting on the park. He's like, do you even know who Chuck is? And the guy's like, nah, I have no idea who Chuck is. Nobody knows who Chuck is. Chuck is esoteric. Chuck is arcane. Chuck is hidden. People are unaware of a truth that exists in this fictional world that's detrimental, that's crucial to their very existence, right? So who is Chuck? He says, I've asked 24 people. Nobody knows who Chuck is. This Krantz guy is the Oz of the apocalypse. Do you see that? They're talking about and making reference to the Wizard of Oz, who lives in the Emerald City. I hope that we're making some connections here, okay? Sometimes it's subtle. To me, it's very obvious. I've been studying this for years, okay? So if anything I say goes over your head, like I said, feel free to talk about it. I encourage you guys to talk with one another, especially those of you who have been around on my channel for a while versus people who are more new. And, check out some of my videos to catch up to if you'd like to. So the Oz of the apocalypse. So he takes a walk with him. And he says, you know how people say there's 24 hours in a day? So now we're talking about time. I wonder what they're going to say about time as these characters in this fictitious movie are experiencing it. He says, well, they're all wrong. There's not 24 hours in a day. There's actually 23 hours and 56 minutes. Less time than we thought. Interesting. But remember, I said that the movie is not showing us our time where we live in now. Symbolically, they're showing us the time whenever there was beams of light shooting up and it was the prior age or the age to come, either one, okay? They're showing us an apocalyptic event, but which one? Is it death by water, the flooding of the world, or death by fire, which is the sun heating up and burning the earth and scorching the earth? So, less time in a day. And then immediately after he makes that comment, they look over, whoosh, there's Charles Krantz again. Just happens to pop up right when they're talking about time not, either being faster or slower, okay? So he says, based on my calculations, which I assure you are good, I can back it up with some math, there are now 24 hours and 2 minutes in a day. So these characters, during their time that they live in, their time is slowing down. He says, you're saying Earth's rotation is slowing down? That's how they have to explain it in academics, because that's how they account for the passing of days. The Earth has to either speed up its rotation and spin faster all of a sudden, which means they have to account for that and try to explain that away, which I've shown you guys that, okay, let me just real quick, I'm going to sidestep. Our time, not theirs, their time represents the prior age and the age to come, okay? Not the age we live in now. The age we live in now, when we get closer to our apocalypse, our time will shorten. There will be a shortening of the days, a shortening of time and timekeeping specifically. But during those other cycles, every other cycle, their time actually slows down. They have much longer days and time seems to drag on forever. So he's saying, you're telling me Earth's rotation has slowed down? Now, can we find a correlation between the rotation of the Earth in the movie, in this fictitious fantasy movie, and our world today? Yes, we can. There are many articles that point out and discuss that time is changing and therefore something must be happening with the Earth's rotation right now. This is not the movie. This is our world. This is your news. This is your world that you live in right now. These are omens that if you open your eyes and pay attention, you can start to realize something's happening. Something is changing with the world that we live in. And it's affecting our norms. It's affecting our world. It's affecting our ages, our actual age, right? It's affecting all kinds of things. Why is the Earth spinning faster? Well, it's really not. The luminaries are speeding up, okay? That's how we really ultimately keep track of time. It establishes that at the very beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis when it says this is what they're for. They're to keep track of seasons and months and days and stuff, which are the lights above. If those lights slow down, our days will be longer. If those lights speed up, our days will be faster. So it's not the ground spinning around. It's just, from my perspective, it's the luminaries that are spinning faster, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson. Everyone pretty much agrees, though. Now, sometimes they'll go back and forth, and they'll move their goalposts, and they'll say, well, this time it's slowing down, this time it's speeding up. But in general, I found that, they tend to agree that time is speeding up. He says a lot of folks think that all these disasters are because of what humans have done to the environment. I talk about this all the time. Global warming and all these concepts, right? People are like, oh, it's humans, it's human caused, it's pollution, it's what we're doing to the environment. This guy has the same point that I always make. Listen to him. I'm going to reverse it. A lot of folks think that all of these disasters are being caused by what we, humanity, has done to the environment. Not so. Whatever's happening is much larger than environmental degradation, human caused. So this guy goes on to make the point that the Earth is much bigger than humans are, okay? And it is the Earth that is causing these things. We are prideful and we put ourselves for being the blame and the end-all be-all for everything, but it's not humanity. Now, he goes for a walk. And he meets this girl who's roller skating. You can see the neighborhood lights, they're all lit up. And then there's a huge loud boom and all the neighborhood lights turn off and they're left in the dark. Now, a lot of these booms, I believe, are actually going to be the gases bursting out of the earth and causing like a type of thunder and stuff like that. And the girl says, "Is everything going to be okay?" He says, "Sure it is." But then the second he says everything's going to be okay, look at the color of the light on his face. I know it's hard to see, but he says it's going to be okay, and a blue light starts to shine. A sort of cyan color, a sort of indigo color. Hey, I just got a donation from Giant Reality in the chat. That was kind. Thank you. Oh, actually, I've met Stellium7. So yes, thank you so much for that. I appreciate you. All right, cool. Let's continue on. So they both look towards where this blue light is coming from. Immediately after they say it's going to be okay. And they see the windows have these blue sort of indigo colored lights, these cyan colored lights, right? Bluish green lights. And it's reflecting off of their skin. And it says, "Thanks, Chuck." And it's like a ghost. It's like an apparition. This is like something you see people putting up during Halloween or something. And it's Chuck. And he's in every window all over the place. Not just in this house, but in every house, every neighborhood, all of the windows. And everything's dark. You start to see, now if you squint your eyes and you make it really blurry, you can't make out Chuck. Or if I just make the picture smaller, you have no idea that that's Chuck. All you see is these sort of human-like figures or ghost-like apparitions, just blue lights, right? Popping up all over the world, so to speak, okay? Because they make the point this is actually happening all over the world. So he looks around, he sees Chuck, the blue light, just all over the place, a blue hologram or whatnot. And he says, "Go home." He's talking to the girl in the movie, but the movies are talking to you. So they show you Chuck, they show you the blue light, and then they tell you to go home. Now, to me, personally, it couldn't be any more clear than that. They're talking about those of us who resonate with the Garden of Eden, with the Fountain of Youth, with Hyperborea, with the terrestrial paradise, to go home. To kick back, to get that vacation from the crazy world that you deserve, that you feel. Some of you. I do, okay? So they say go home. Now he does go home. He goes to his girlfriend's house, and he says, they just started showing up. All these blue lights just started to show up all over the place, right? Now, they're just small versions of a much bigger reality, which I'll get to in a minute here. He looks around, he's like, I know, I saw. He says, "Is it just here? Like in our neighborhood?" She says, "I think it's everywhere." So the movie's telling you what you're seeing here locally is happening around the world. And they do that quite often. They'll take the macrocosm and they'll shrink it down symbolically into the mesocosm or the microcosm. And then suddenly the movie shifts real quick and we go to Chuck. We see Chuck, who's sick or in a coma or something on a hospital bed. And they show his heartbeat, which is the same heart rate that was shown on all of those monitors, interestingly enough. But then it cuts right back, and the boyfriend and the girlfriend are holding hands, and they're walking in the nighttime, and you can see the sky is just lit up. You can see the entire cosmos over here, the whole galaxy, like it's really close, which is interesting. You also see these poles that they're walking past. Symbolically, these are those pillars, those poles of light during the age of light, where it lit up the firmament, and you could see stuff like that all over the time. It was beautiful. It was majestic. There are many different oral traditions from Native American tribes, at least, that talk about the time when the sky looked like it was much lower. And they have this story where they were worried that the sky was going to fall on them and crush them. So what they did, according to the stories and the oral tradition, is around the world, they would call the elders and they would all decide to put up poles at the same time and prop up the sky. And they would yell one word in unison and they would heave it at the same time. And they kept pushing and they kept pushing until they finally put the sky back into its rightful place. And I believe that that's what the movie is basically showing to us, right? How close the sky is. So the boyfriend and girlfriend, they go take a seat for the end of the world. And he says, "It's the brightest I've ever seen these stars." I concur. It's the brightest I've ever seen the moon right now in real life. It's the brightest I've ever seen the sun. It's the brightest I've ever seen the stars. We're seeing comets all the time now. The luminaries are really becoming noticeable. might be wise to pay attention. So they're sitting there, all these little blue lights of Chuck are lighting up all throughout the place, and they're staring at the sky, watching, looking up, right? Knowing that there's a correlation between what they're seeing with this beautiful sky and something's happening. Now the girlfriend says, oh, it's the North Star, but then she's cut off. And if you look right about here, you'll see it disappears. Oh, here, it's right here. So watch right here. I'll replay it again for you, okay? You see that star? Right over here? Right about there? It will disappear. That's the North Star, okay? The North Star is akin to and symbolic of the apex dome, the very middle, at the top of our world, of the cosmic dome above us, okay? The North Star disappears. And they continue to watch. And then another star disappears. A planet disappears. He says, there goes Mars. The luminaries are starting to stop. They're stopping giving off light. They're just disappearing. Now, if modern academics is correct about their theories on all of these things, that's pretty much impossible. There's no way that that would ever happen, right? But if we see the impossible becoming reality, we have to change our perspectives. We have to consider alternative theories and cosmologies and realities and stuff, right? So then these booms start happening and all the stars start to disappear. And then they cut right back to Chuck during the daytime, it looks like. And his wife is saying, you go on, Chuck. His son is over here crying. And she says, 39 years, 39 great years. Chuck's dying. This guy Chuck, that we see as a ghostly apparition throughout this entire world, being placed into the lives of every single person in the world, what does he have to do? Just some guy, Chuck, right? He's dying. And also, so is their world starting to disappear. We have a correlation between the world that these characters are living in and this character named Chuck. So she looks over at her boyfriend one last time, and he says, I love, and then it's darkness. Darkness is always how it begins, and darkness is always how it ends. Okay? So that's the end of Act 3. Now we're going to move into Act 2, Buskers Forever. What is a busker? You'll find out here in a minute. Buskers Forever. Now remember, we're going in reverse order, so you just watched the world end, which is our world, shown to us in a cartoonified manner, okay? Things that I believe will happen actually in this world. Pardon me. Now, the narrator starts off. He says, it was a Thursday afternoon. It's interesting that they chose this particular building with the dome on top of it. It was a Thursday afternoon. Why was it a Thursday afternoon, Stephen King? It could have been a Monday afternoon. It could have been a Wednesday afternoon. It could have been a Sunday afternoon. No. Specifically, it was the day of Thor. It was Thor's day. All of our days of the week are named after ancient gods, as well as many of our months and all of these timekeeping methods and so many of our spaceships that we send up there into outer space and so many of the comets and so many of the luminaries, and they're all reminiscent of antiquity, of beliefs that people had. If those beliefs were so ridiculous, why do we keep that? You know what I mean? But it was the day of Thor. Thor's day. Thor is, you've probably seen him in Marvel movies and stuff. He's the god of lightning, the god of thunder. He's associated with electricity and his hammer and whatnot, right? But the word Thor is actually Tor. You can spell it, you can pronounce it in different ways, but it means tower. It means towering rock. It means high and lofty mountain. A high and lofty mountain that's associated with electrical discharge. A plasma volcano, as I like to call it. So, the narrator's continuing to talk as this girl right here sets up her drums in the middle of this plaza, in the middle of this little city. And he says, there is time. There is a way in. What an interesting thing to say, right? If we stay on course with the symbolism as I'm presenting it to you, there is time. We're talking about the apocalypse on the way, right? We're talking about massive changes on Earth. There is time. And there is a way in. Into what? I think it's talking about the Garden of Eden. I think it's talking about into Hyperborea. I think it's talking about into terrestrial paradise as a safe place to live and to grow and to prosper for hundreds of years as people's lifespans lengthen, right? But that's me making a lot of connections that I haven't really shared with you at this point. Finding the inn is half the fun, says the narrator, right? So finding out about these things, about our world, the things I'm sharing with you, is half the fun. Living your life and trying to figure out what's the purpose, what's the point. Maybe even most of the fun, right? The struggle is most of the fun, right? It's when you get to the finish line of a race, that's nice. That feels good. But the value is the running, right? The running, the journey, the story. You know, when the story is over, it's kind of sad actually, because now the story's over. But you enjoy the moment. And it's talking about life. It's talking about enjoying life, enjoying the moment, making the most of life instead of focusing on the apocalypse or focusing on death or something like that. Living life, truly living. Now, Chuck's going to get his Starbucks or whatever. I only wanted to share this with you because this is another example of coffee just being shown to you. Speaking of which, hold on, let me take a sip here. They do this all the time in the movies. They don't even have a brand. They don't even care what kind of coffee or what kind of milk you drink. They want you to drink cow milk and they want you to drink coffee. I stopped personally drinking cow milk. I still drink coffee. I'm struggling with that, but I just wanted to point it out. And if you start taking notice when you're watching movies, you'll see they put the coffee in there. They want you to drink your coffee. Let's see, Charles Krantz. So now we're going to focus on Chuck. Okay, this is before he started getting sick and dying or whatever. So we go back in time. The narrator says gray suit, blue shirt, blue tie. So symbolically, he's going to start representing different things. On one hand, he's going to represent Rupus Nigra, that dark mountain, which is represented by the outer jacket that he's wearing, and the blue beam that comes out from within, which represents his shirt. Okay, he's been sent by his bank, Midwest Trust. Now, a bank is where the water meets the edge of land, right? That's the bank. It's very interesting terminology when you get into it. Midwest Trust is the name of his bank. Now, if he represents the blue beam at the center of the world, or can represent that, right? That geoplasma that shoots up out of that mountain, that black rock, that dark rock. The bank is called Midwest Trust. Mid means in the middle of. West, like I said, in ancient times and antiquity did not mean the West that we have today. It meant down into the earth. Mid, middle, center, down into the earth, and trust, right? Trust these people who are from this region, from this area. So this is symbolically what this represents. This is the bank where the rock meets the land, or I'm sorry, where the rock meets the water. It could be on either side, but these are the banks, right? And these people who live here, it is my theory, and I present this in my second book, Return to Hyperborea, that when they leave paradise, because of a cataclysm, they have to leave paradise, they come out here to the Southlands, and they become Phoenicians, or people from the land of the Phoenix. They become barbarians, or people from the bar of bars, or the column of columns, or the pillar of pillars, or the light of lights, etc. They become Tartarians, the Tartars, the tree of trees. That's how I used to say tree a long time ago. It was dar or tar or deru or taru or terra. Anyways, so they come out and they take their knowledge. They take their exchanging systems and bartering systems and their knowledge of navigating waters and stuff. And they come and they end up basically using that to acquire land in the Southlands where we live today. And they end up taking over the world. That's just a short explanation, okay? This is also seen, this whole color thing and the Western and the West stuff, Midwest. This is seen in 21 Pilots. Once again, Midwest indigo, right? The light, the indigo light, bluish-green light, geoplasma that comes up out of the earth, the main one right at the middle, in the west, the furthest west, in the middle. And we also have, of course, in this particular picture, the lead singer is doing the Atlas pose because that beam shoots up into the sky and it separates the higher it goes up, and it creates a figure with outstretched arms. Looks like it could be hanging on something or upon something, or maybe it's a bird. It's some sort of a cosmic bird of creation or something. And they're also in the ice. So they're showing you symbolically, this would be the North Pole. Okay. So they're on this huge frozen water right now. But anyways, that's the band. Now back to Chuck. They say his life is narrower. That's interesting. His life is narrower. That's an interesting way to say that. Let's examine Chuck a bit more, right? He understands that narrowing is the natural order of things. He also has only 9 months to live. So whatever Chuck represents, and he represents a few different things, or a multitude of things, okay? On one hand, he represents the good blue beam that shoots up out of the center of the earth, geoplasma, gases that erupt from the earth and ionize and become light, right? Shoots straight up, as we just discussed. But he also can represent a blue light that comes down from the sun, right? Our sunlight. That light, it spreads out into what we call daytime. But whenever it narrows and that daytime shortens, or the days shorten, the light gets hotter and hotter as it's more and more focused. And it will start to change colors from white light, like we have now, to a blue light as it gets hotter and hotter and more narrow. Keep that in mind, okay? So now he's also representing two different things at the same time. He's representing the blue light of the earth that shoots up and the blue light of the sun that will shoot down when it makes its way to the North Pole, as I've explained in a couple of videos, which I'll share with you here, right? So here's one of my prior videos where I talk about, here's the firmament of the earth, here's the dome, this is the plasma sphere, or tubes of plasma that come down, hit the dome. The light passes through that, or the light passes through the dome, which acts as a lens. The light comes inwards as it refracts off of the dome, creating a focal point, or meeting at a focal point. That light is then redistributed down onto the surface where we live into what we call daytime. That focal point will move in the same direction as the plasma above it is spiraling. Okay, so that's just a short tutorial on daytime when it's normal. When that light above, which is responsible for creating that focal point, when that light above narrows, then daytime below will also correspond and narrow, and therefore it will get hotter and hotter and hotter, and that focal point will start to turn blue, which is our sun. The sun will start to turn blue and scorch the earth with pure, simple daytime light. So if you want to check out this video or others like it, you know, you can look up, where is it? I think I share that here. Ah, here it is. So you want to look for one called The Shortening of Days on my playlist, or you can just do a search on my channel. It's got this as the thumbnail. I want to go back though, and I want to mention some other stuff that I mentioned in this video. This is called the Blue Star Kachina. It's a Hopi prophecy from Native Americans here in the United States. They have a prophecy that before the world ends, we will see a blue star in the sky. The sun is considered a star. This blue star god, or Kachina, which is interesting because it's the word, it means like our life, basically. I don't want to get too deep. Anyways, the blue star Kachina appears, and according to the prophecy of the Hopi, it will make its way to the plaza of the earth, which is the center of the earth, which is at the North Pole, depending on how you see things. And it will remove its mask, its facial covering, and it will dance in the center of the earth, and that leads to an apocalyptic event according to the Hopi Nation. This is what the sun, I believe, will look like when it gets really hot and very narrow in daylight. It will just look like a blue ring in the sky, and it will be very dark all the way around it because daylight is so focused and so narrow. So we'll literally see nighttime all the way around the sun, if this is correct. Okay, if there's validity to my theory here. And this is, we would expect the sun to look something like this, where it gets so dark in the middle. That is the blue star Kachina removing its mask. And this is how other Aztec sun gods, this is how they're portrayed too. They're all blue, but they paint the middle of their face black, like Huitzilopochtli, which we bring up all the time. All right, so now let's see if Chuck does any of this. Let's find out, right? Now, we've got the drummer. She sees Mr. Businessman on his way coming towards her. And as he does, this woman named Taylor, the drummer, wants to announce his approach. So what does she do? She starts beating to the rhythm, right? As Chuck is getting closer and closer. For the first time today, Taylor feels a spark. Interesting. The closer and closer we get to the apocalypse, the more our souls start to energize. People start getting excited. People can't sleep. You know, our circadian rhythms are being thrown off, and we just instinctively, intuitively, and often subconsciously know something's changing. Something's happening as it gets closer and it gets closer. And it says the groove is like a road that you want to follow. That to me is a small little clue that you need to follow the sun, okay? If he's now representing the sun will spiral. You got to watch that video, okay? Because I don't want to go into it. It'll take too long. But my theory is the sun will leave and transgress the northern tropics, and it'll start spiraling its way in towards the North Pole. If it does that and it gets as hot as I believe it will, it's going to bake and burn the ground beneath it, creating the yellow brick road that will lead to Oz, or terrestrial paradise on Earth, okay? I know that was a lot. Bear with me. You can catch up. We got plenty of time, as the movie just told us. She believes Mr. Businessman will go on past, but instead of floating on by, he stops. The sun stops. Solstice. Okay? This is what I'm getting from it. The sun, if he now represents the blue sun, moving about on its trek over the earth, it now stops. Where does it stop? Where does he stop if he now represents the blue sun, which will be our apocalypse by fire? He stops in the middle of the plaza. Exactly as the Hopi have said, exactly as the prophecy goes. Well, let's see what he does, because the Blue Star Kachina has to dance in the middle of the plaza. What does he do? He starts to feel the rhythm. He dances. He's starting to dance all over the place. He's getting jiggy with it in the middle of the plaza, dancing to the beat, right? The quickening beat, the heartbeat of the world or whatnot. And he's rocking out. But then he looks over and he sees the woman in the red dress. Now, were you guys paying attention to me? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? Look again. I'm just kidding. That's a shout out to the Matrix. Anyways, so he represents blue. She represents red. He calls her sister. There's a lot of symbolism, I believe, that's happening here. If this is not about two people, this is not just some story. It is, but this is layered, okay? There's lots of layers to this. If he represents the sun, she must represent the moon, the male, the female, the masculine, the feminine. Or if he represents the blue beam, she represents the opposite, which is that red door above the blue beam, or that inverted dome at the top of the firmament. I know I'm throwing a lot of words out there. You know, be patient and just take whatever vibes and resonates with you for now, okay? So they get together, or she's watching him just rock out, and he's dancing in the plaza as the Blue Star Kachina. And everyone is starting to feel the vibe. Now, pay attention to this. They're gathering a crowd in a circle around them, okay? So there's a whole crowd of people. If this represents the whole world, because he's the sun, all these people around them, as they start to dance together, represent the nations of the world, symbolically speaking. Or they could. You could make the argument that if we're being shown the large scale, and this is the whole world, and some event that happens on a worldwide scale, this is the center of the world. The sun leads the way, the moon follows as they get closer and closer and closer until there is a great conjunction, until there is an eclipse. The eclipse, I should say, that leads to an apocalyptic event. Anyway, so they start dancing together. You've got the nations surrounding the camp of the saints, to quote the Bible, right? They're dancing together and having a great time, but then all of a sudden something happens. He's got like some kind of headache or migraine, so he reaches for his facial covering, his glasses that are black, and he takes them off, removing his facial covering, exactly like, or similar to, okay, the Blue Star Kachina, that the prophecy says he will remove his mask as he dances in the plaza. So he takes them off. They continue to rock out. The drummer does the Atlas pose, putting her hands up high into the sky. And that's what I want to talk about, the Atlas pose. Okay, so these are some petroglyphs that are seen all around the world. These only represent a fraction, a small number of these exact same types of petroglyphs. At first, many people just chalked this up to, that's how they drew people. You know, this is just a person. But why are there two dots on either side? You know, why do they always have the legs bowed out or bent out and then the arms upwards? This is Atlas. Okay, Atlas was a titan in ancient times who held up the sky, who did not hold up the earth itself, okay, but Atlas held up the sky. Sometimes he's shown as holding up the moon. Sometimes Atlas holds up another world or something like that, right? But this is Atlas. Why? Because this is Atlantis. This is where, a location where there is a mountain at the middle of the world that has a beam of light that shoots up out of it and branches off high into the sky directly underneath a circular object that is seen in the sky, which is, I believe, the apex dome. So people saw this in the heavens, and they drew it and they carved it out on rock. And if you're trying to draw a circle on rock, it becomes more square-like with jagged edges and stuff. But we see the same story written in stone across the world by the thousands. On the left here, you'll see an example of a plasma discharge as it is created in a laboratory. It shoots upwards. It creates a little dome of energy because there's magnets down there that are confined. So the energy creates a little dome at the bottom, which creates legs, or a bell shape, you could say. It shoots up. It creates a little toroidal field that goes around, which creates these little circles on the edge. And then it splits off at the top, giving you arms. Right? So if you magnify this to a gigantic scale, this is kind of what people see. Some people saw a face. They didn't see a body of a stick figure person. They saw an owl or other creatures and shapes and things like that. So we'll also see this symbol is worn by people in some tribes in Africa, and they call this the Kanaga, right? Which is interesting because ka within Hebrew or Phoenician means like. Naga means serpentine, which goes all the way back to plasma, not snakes, plasma, serpents, seraphim, they're different, okay? So, like serpent-like. This shape is literally called serpent-like. Interesting. Now, they're all in the van together, and she says, today is magic. Today was the day when the sun and the moon eclipsed each other. They met together. They danced in the middle of the world, the plaza. This is a magical time. Why? Because this is when energy floods the surface where we live, right? People develop telepathy once more. There's a one-world language, right? There's not all these diverse guttural utterances that we call language today. There is a knowing. There's a sharing. There's an intimate communicating and instant empathy so strong that people pick up on it. We call that telepathy, right? So it's a time of magic and mysticism and strange things happening. Now, they all sit down, and Chuck looks over and he sees something interesting. He sees himself, actually, but it's symbolized. He sees a fountain because he, like I said earlier, he was representing the sun at the center of the world, but also at the center of the world is that beam of light that shoots up and re-energizes and reinvigorates the world. It is the fountain of youth. That electrical charge in the atmosphere, ambient all around humans, stimulates collagen and elastin and the production of those things that keep you looking young and vigorous and vibrant and keep your cells from just dying off, cures cancer and all kinds of other things. It is a healing light. And it heals the nations that come to it. So he looks over, he sees the fountain, and then they show the sun as well, which is appropriate. They call themselves the buskers. Remember the title of this was buskers? So if we look up the word busk, it implies, this is just one version of it, but it implies to prepare, to go, to set out, right? To prepare oneself. We can also look it up under Wiktionary, which I did, and in Spanish, it comes from buscar, or busque in French, but they both have similar meanings. So buscare, or buscar in Spanish, means to seek, to search for, to look for, to find, to scour. Knock, and the door will open. Ask, and you shall receive, right? These are seekers. I like to call them truth seekers, right? People who are looking for home, looking for the way, looking looking for goodness and righteousness and everything good in the world. Now, they both stop in front of this, what looks like a movie theater called El Dorado, which the sign isn't sideways like most signs are. Like normally the sign would go from over there to over there, right? But it's not. It's a column. The sign is a pillar. It's a beam, symbolically speaking, and it's El Dorado. What does El Dorado mean? Let's look it up. Let's find out. If we look up Dorado, I could tell you El means the. It's a definite article in Spanish. It can also mean God and stuff like that. So that's interesting too. God, El. Dorado, what does that mean? I'll tell you. In short, it means gilded. Or it comes from the word aurore. Or, what was the one before it? Dorore or dorare, to gild. Aurore, like aurora. To gild, from aurum, which means gold. It does not mean gold. Dorado, like people say, oh, it's a city of gold. No, it's not. Okay, it's not actual gold substance. It's not the metallic substance at all. If you go way back in time, the word gold, a descriptor that we use to describe a particular metal, it meant not the substance. It meant to shine. Gold comes from the Proto-Indo-European root word gel, which is where we get words like ghoul or spirits, you know, shining apparitions and stuff. And it means to shine. So El Dorado in that beam in the plaza at the middle of the world literally means the shining, which is also another Stephen King movie. In Stephen King's movie, The Shining was this ability. It was a powerful spirit that some characters had, where they basically had precognitive abilities. They could predict the future. They could sense things. They could feel and see things that other people couldn't. And it permeates all of his books, from what I understand. Although I've not read one single Stephen King book, they come up all the time in my research. The Shining, which was found in the Overlook Hotel in the movie, right? Which we might have to break down one of these days. All right, we go to the last act, which is actually the first act. I contain multitudes. This is where we really get into the fractal verse as I teach it, the multiverse theory, if you will. So the kid's sitting down. This is young Chuck, little Chuck, when he was a little boy, and these are his grandparents. He was being babysat by his grandparents, and they had to watch him because he's also an orphan. Lo and behold, always orphans. The protagonists these days are almost always orphans. Their parents have died. Their parents have abandoned them. Their parents were murdered, whatever it may be. Start paying attention. Remember when we broke down The Wizard of Oz and we're like, why is Dorothy an orphan? Why are her parents never mentioned? You know what I mean? Pay attention to the orphan symbolism and you'll see it starting to pop up a lot, almost every time across the board. So he's an orphan. His grandparents' house became his house. Now, I've talked about the symbolism here of the house, how the house oftentimes, especially if it's a white house or a black house, it on the small scale represents our entire earth. The whole world is seen as a white house or being ruled by a white house, or a black house or being ruled by a black house. In short, this represents the mountain that I showed you on that map at the middle of the world at the North Pole. One era, it will be shiny and white looking, and that is the time of magic. That's the time when the blue beam lives there and it comes up out of it and everything. The other era is when that blue beam moves out or it retracts and it's no longer there. And that whole magnetic metallic mountain starts to rust and it becomes black, basically. And that's why it's known as Rupus Nigra, or the Black Rock. So what did he say here? Every inch of this home was his, except for one thing: the cupola on the roof. I don't know what that. The cupola on the roof. Okay, so he was not allowed to go up to the highest part of the house, which was the attic, basically. Okay, Chuck was forbidden from going into the cupola. And there's that room again, same room you saw with the other guy, right? There's a reason for that. So he looks up. He sees the handle. He tries to get into it, but it's locked, right? He says, "What could you see from the high window?" He's asking his grandfather. By the way, this is also Luke Skywalker. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but that's definitely Luke Skywalker. Is super old. His grandfather says, if you went up there, Albi. Let's look at his name real quick, okay? Anytime you see Albi, Albion, albino, it means white, okay? So just so you know. Albi Krantz. If you went up there, you might see a lot more than you wanted because it's full of ghosts. So whatever the attic represents in this white house where the blue beam lives as a child, symbolically speaking, okay? The top of it has ghosts, right? The place where the ghosts live, or the dead, this is called a necropolis. There is a necropolis of the earth, traditionally speaking, a place where all of the spirits sort of are attracted to, they go off to, they live in the necropolis. If you ask the Inuit or Eskimo tribes of the Arctic, they will tell you that there is a river, which is a necropolis up at the North Pole. And that's what they considered to be the Aurora Borealis, as spirits that are just up there flowing in this spiritual river. There's also a necropolis under the land at the North Pole, where there's all these gases that are built up and pushed toward the center. Okay, and if they're ionized, you will see ghosts, you will see lights, you'll see plasmas. And they'll probably be green because of the gases that are up there, right? The gas determines the color. And then he says, you remember Scrooge? Christmas yet to come, right? This allusion to Christmas. Christmas is a celebration or a memorial of an apocalyptic event, the appearance of the light, when the light appears into the world. You know, I don't want to get too into the religion or anything like that. And then that's the solstice. That's after the solstice, right? 3 days after the solstice, basically, when the sun stops. We have another solstice in the summertime. So we have a summer apocalypse and a winter apocalypse that are marked by these holy days or these set apart times. These were reverent times. These were not times of consumerism and selling things and getting drunk and all these types of things. These were reverent times where people gathered together to make sure they were in a safe place with family members and loved ones. They lit candles and Yule logs and set fires that would ensure that they could burn for days and days at a time. Why? Because the lights would all go out, or could, if that was the time. So they would gather together at these set apart times, and they would do it every year until it became tradition. Now, if the world doesn't end every year when people are doing this, they start to, they start to tell stories. These become carols and stories of old and stuff. But anyways, after people start forgetting the reason they're doing that, because the apocalypse takes a very long time to come back, then it just turns into tradition. It becomes consumerism and stuff. But these are Christmas Day catastrophes, okay, or midsummer catastrophes. Now we go back. This is when he was a little boy. This is one of his teachers, and she's also quoting Walt Whitman. It's the same cycle. It's happening over and over again, just different faces, different things. Now we're going to start getting more into like the multiverse or the fractal verse. She says, I am large. I contain multitudes. She's quoting Walt Whitman once more. So Chuck comes up to her and he says, what does he mean when he says, I am large, I contain multitudes? So the teacher is pleasantly surprised by the student. She says, what do you think he means? Right? She doesn't just give him an answer, which I love. I love this about teachers. I think this is the best way to teach. Sometimes it's just called the Socratic method, but it's getting the student to try to push the boundaries and limitations or perceived limitations of their own mind, right? To start thinking for themselves. All the people that he knows, says Chuck. She says, yes, it's all the people that he knows, but maybe he means even more than that. So she sits down in front of him and she puts her hands on either side of his head there. She says, what's between here? What's between my hands? My brain. Ah, now that's interesting. I've talked about the great brain of space. Okay. If you could think, I don't want to get too off track, but if you think of the cosmos as actually being a brain that we live inside of, I think there's a case to be made for that. Or more specifically, the mind. I refer to this concept as the mind of God, that we are a dream within a dream, that we are thoughts that are thought about from what we call and refer to commonly as God. She says, what is in here besides just your brain? What's in your brain, right? The brain is just a physical manifestation of something invisible, an invisible quality. right between my hands right now. What's in here? He says, I don't know. Now that's a truth. He doesn't know what's in his brain. He's not actively thinking and meditating upon himself, his thoughts, his collection of all the information of everything he smells and tastes and looks at and feels, right? Because he's just living his little experience, but it's all there. It's all there. But all of those little worlds, all of those little creations and realities in his mind, he's unaware of. He doesn't think about them specifically. All those creatures living in his mind are who? They are the who, actually. They're so microscopic. They're so minuscule. He's unaware of them. So if someone brings them up, the name he would give them is the only thing he can, which is who? You'll see that come up time and time again as well. She says, all the people you know, are they in there? He says, yes, just the people that you know. Everything you see, everything that you know is worlds within worlds inside of your mind. The world, Chuck, planes in the sky, manhole covers in the streets. Every year that you live, that world inside of your head gets bigger and brighter and more detailed and more complex. You will build cities and countries and continents. You will fill them with people, citizens, real and imagined. You will fill the whole thing, fill it up entirely. And he's just mind blown at this moment as he's realizing, right? This kind of reminds me of Doctor Strange when she touches Doctor Strange on the forehead and he flies through the fractal verse. Everyone you will ever know, everyone you ever just imagine, it'll be a universe, a whole universe right between my hands. You contain multitudes. And I think that's a lovely thought. I believe that this is reciprocated throughout history by different gurus and saviors and enlightened beings and wise people throughout time. It's the concept of the kingdom of heaven existing within us. I call this the fractal verse. It's fractal in nature, right? We live inside of the mind of God. We must. If God is everywhere and omnipresent, right? So we live inside of the mind of God. But because we are also made of God, because God is omnipresent, then within our minds, it must keep on going, right? Worlds upon worlds, multitudes inside of us. What does that mean? That means whatever you think of changes history for those worlds inside of you, right? And because you're altering those worlds inside of you, they inversely alter you. So all you need to do to be happy, to take your life by the reins, to live how you want to walk your path and blaze your trail, is to simply be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Or believe, right? You simply believe. You think, and therefore you are. Isn't that wonderful? She says. So he's inspired. He wants to go up to the attic now. She just opened his mind, so now he's going to be able to open the attic door, which represents the mind of God, or the top of our dome physically, so we can get into the mind of God or traverse all the other earths, all the other worlds out there. So he goes up to the emerald green knob. He takes the keys. Remember, he represents that powerful entity, that beam of light that shoots up out of the middle of the world, right? That light went by many names. He takes his keys, he opens the forbidden door, and he goes inside. He is the door god. He is the god of doorways. He is the key holder, the key master. And he lives in between the pillars of Hercules, which I've gone into great detail about a time or two. Always holding the keys, always represented by a pillar or a staff, right? The key god, the strong one of Jan, or you could say Gan, which means garden, okay? The strong garden. His grandfather catches him and he goes up there and he looks into the attic and he freaks out because he sees himself dying. Exactly like in the movie What was this movie called? Not Real Big Fish. Big Fish. Okay, that's another classic one, a really good one. So in the movie Big Fish, these kids, they meet this witch or whatever, and she's one-eyes. Like the one-eye symbolism represents Odin, it represents one-eyed Willie, it represents the apex dome, the one eyeball of our world that faces downwards and is constantly watching over us. And when they look into the one eye of the witch, they see their own death. The same thing happens here with his grandfather when he looks into the attic, which is the top, right? So he looks into the eye of the world, or the attic, or the apex dome that hangs over us, and he sees his own death. He sees the future. He's able to predict things suddenly. Now, there's this dance. This is so interesting. There's always a gala, a dance, a masquerade ball, all these types of things in these movies, and they all represent the same thing. So he gets to dance with the woman in red once again, right? And he was really afraid to dance with her. As a kid, this was his crush. This ends up becoming his wife, right? He was scared to take those steps. He was scared to go out on a limb and to ask this pretty girl to dance with him. But he faced his fears. He was brave. He was courageous. And he went after the girl that he loves. And he committed to that. And because he did, he got a kiss, which never would have happened if he lived in fear, if he stayed in the same place as a wallflower. But when he got around and he started to move and he took action, action is growth. When you stop taking action, you stop growing and you become stagnant, and that leads to death. And it's not just a physical death, it's a death in all areas of life, right? We manifest our dreams and destiny as they go hand in hand with one another's concepts. Then he's all excited. He got a kiss, so he's dancing around this football field. He says, I remember thinking the universe is large and it contains multitudes, but it also contains me. This is the fractal nature of it, right? And at this moment, I am wonderful. Now, if he's wonderful and the universe is also inside of him, what does that mean? That means he's changing the universe. He's not just changing the world, as sometimes we aspire to do. He's changing all of reality. And there is something mathematically, the movie gets into mathematics, which I'm not a real big fan of, but mathematically speaking, this is inevitable. It's a crucial part of our very own reality. It's called the butterfly effect. It's called chaos theory. Everything, every action, no matter how imperceptibly tiny, all the way inside of our minds, those tiny universes, every single one resonates and flows and affects every other one. It's all connected. So because he is wonderful, because he is right with the world, things will start to change in the world that he lives in. And inversely, those worlds within his mind. So because he took those steps, because he decided to live his life and to do what made him feel good, a law unto itself, he pursued his own happiness. And because he did that, because he decided to live and to really live and to move and to take action and to dance, he marries that girl. And when he's on his deathbed, he was able to look back at his life and be happy and to be content with the life he lived. Now he grows up to be a teenager. He gets into the attic and he doesn't see anything, but right when he's about to leave, he hears the heart rate monitor beeping behind him. And he turns around to see, lo and behold, himself. He sees his death predicted in the attic as a ghost. And then the narrator kicks in and says, "It's the waiting," he said. "That's the hard part. Waiting for the apocalypse. Waiting for death, our own personal deaths, right? But specifically, I'm going to be talking about the apocalypse because, a lot of people die during the apocalypse. So, I'm going to speak from two angles. One is waiting around for the apocalypse to happen. The other one is waiting around for your own life to end. Now, Chuck's own waiting would begin now that he saw his death. Fix that camera. There we go. So now, as a teenager, Chuck sees his own death, right? And his waiting begins. Now he's just waiting for death. Everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. But Chuck knows this, and he knows if he just thinks and he focuses on the end, his worlds, his multitudes will also adapt, and they will all be death-minded. There will all be a world full of decay. So, he says, how long will that be? And then the apparition disappears, insisting he insists it had never been there in the first place. Chuck says to himself, it was never there. And I will insist that it was never there. And I will live my life out until it runs out. So he knows about the apocalypse, or he knows that inevitably he will die. But instead of focusing on the time to come, he's going to live in the moment. He's going to truly live and make the very most out of the life that he has, right? Because if he's just death-minded, he's focusing on the end, and he cannot enjoy the beginning and the middle and all of the best parts, the race and the journey and the dance and the action, right? That's what gives death honor. That's what makes death beautiful when it comes around, is what happened all the way leading to it. Personally, that's what I believe. He says, I am wonderful. I would say he's wonder-filled, actually. I deserve to be wonderful. And it shows him throughout all the stages of his life. And he thinks to himself, I contain multitudes. Multitudes of realities and universes and things like that, but also multitudes of possibilities. Multitudes of directions. Limitless ideas, paths, realities that could just be manifested simply by focusing on them, simply by believing. I want to thank everyone for watching this with me today and tuning in. Be sure to check out my website, JayDreamerZ.com. And if you want to support me, go over to Patreon, patreon.com/JayDreamerZ. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.